If all goes as expected, tomorrow, the last of California's voters are going to head to the polls and decide to totally upend the 2026 midterms. They're going to do that not by voting for or against a person. They're going to be voting instead for a plan.
Well, California has less than a week until the November 4th special election on Proposition 50.
That's the ballot measure to temporarily redraw state congressional lines ahead of next year's midterms. ABC 10.
This ballot measure, Prop 50, slices and dices California's congressional maps to carve out as many as 5 more seats for the Dems. These representatives would head to the Capitol in a matter of months.
You want to beat Trump? Democrats can't keep playing by the old rules.
The ads for this proposal don't leave much room for debate about what California is trying to do here.
Vote yes on Prop 50 and let's stick it to Trump.
Is anyone worried about this ballot measure, whether it's going to pass or not?
Not really. Every poll has shown it over 50%.
Ari Berman reports on redistricting over at Mother Jones. If I'd asked you 5 years ago, will California be redrawing its maps in this way? What would you have said?
I mean, the plan that was put forward by California Democrats, particularly Gavin Newsom, seemed crazy at the beginning. I mean, California had an independent redistricting commission that was enshrined by the voters in the state constitution. So the idea that you were just going to override that seemed impossible.
It seemed crazy at the beginning. Seems like the tagline for 2025.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting this measure on the ballot involved building a kind of Rube Goldberg machine for democracy, circumventing that independent commission and recruiting legislative support, along with loads of advertising dollars.
Democrats were so hungry for some kind of response to the Trump administration that they quickly coalesced around this plan. They were able to mobilize their voters, and they were basically able to run an entire political campaign in a span of months, which is very hard to do in a state that's as big and expensive as California.
But despite all this bluster, Ari says it's possible. The GOP already has California beat.
The problem for Democrats is that Republican states beyond Texas have already passed new gerrymandered maps in advance of the midterm. So if Democrats just do this in California and not in any other state, Republicans are still going to have a significant advantage going into the midterms just through redistricting. Whether it's 6 seats, whether it's 10 seats, they're going to be up in the race for the House. And that's going to put Democrats at a disadvantage in trying to win back the House in November 2026.
So you're saying what's happening in California, it's not an end, it's a beginning.
It should be a beginning for Democrats. I mean, that's what the California Democrats I've talked to in the past few weeks have been saying. Listen, we want to send a message to other Democratic states that they need to step up here. The idea is, if this can be done in California, which had a lot of variables going against it, why can't it be done in other states, whether it's Illinois or Maryland or Colorado or what have you?
Today on the show, can Democrats gerrymander their way out of Trump's second term? And if they do, is that a good thing? I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations. This show is brought to you by BetterHelp. As seasons change and days grow darker sooner, it's a great time to reconnect with loved ones and remind the people in your life that you're there. Just as it can take a little courage to send that message or grab coffee with someone you haven't seen in a while, reaching out for therapy can feel difficult too. But it's worth it, and it almost always leaves people wondering, why did I not do that sooner? With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is one of the world's largest online therapy platforms, having served over 5 million people globally. A short questionnaire helps identify your needs and preferences, and BetterHelp's 12-plus years of industry-leading match fulfillment means they typically find the right therapist for you the first time. You can also switch to a different therapist anytime from their tailored recommendations. This month, do not wait to reach out. Whether you're checking in on a friend or reaching out to a therapist yourself, BetterHelp makes it easier to take that first step. What Next listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/whatnext. That's betterhelp.com/whatnext. Okay, remind me what set off the redistricting arms race in California in the first place, because things really heated up this summer, and you actually came on, and at the time you were concerned. You're like, we're in this arms race, like it's a race to the bottom. How are we going to get out of it? But just remind me what kicked it off.
It was Donald Trump demanding that Texas redraw its congressional maps.
This is back in July.
And basically strong-arming Texas into doing it. I mean, that was a remarkable thing, that Texas Republicans, which are not known for their restraint, didn't want to do this. Texas Republicans were happy with the maps they drew. They drew those maps just a few years ago. It seemed crazy, the idea that Texas was just going to redraw their map simply because Trump demanded it. But they quickly folded and they passed the map.
And the idea here is to maintain the House of Representatives as GOP-led so that there isn't the investigative and inquiry function that you might have from a Democratic House of Representatives coming in.
Exactly. I mean, Trump doesn't want to be impeached again. He doesn't want to face federal oversight. His administration has done so many things that call out for federal oversight. And so he doesn't want to see a Democratic House because that will make his life very difficult in the last 2 years of his presidency. So he is doing everything he can to try to avoid that. And usually redistricting is driven by state politics. This is totally different. This is entirely being driven by the president of the United States, essentially doing what he tried to do when he attempted to overturn the election, going state by state by state and saying, find me the votes. That's what he did after 2020. He was unsuccessful in doing it. Now he's basically saying, find me the votes for a new map so I don't have to worry about losing seats, and Republicans don't have to worry about losing these seats in advance of the midterms.
So things start in Texas in July, and it's probably worth us just noting how gerrymandered the Texas maps are. Like, Republicans control 80% of the state's House delegation, even though Donald Trump won only 56% of the vote in 2024. So it's really gerrymandered.
It's really gerrymandered. And I mean, if you look at the map that preceded that map, the map that was passed by the Texas legislature in 2021, that was also heavily gerrymandered because basically all of the demographic change over the past decade in Texas had come from voters of color. But when it came time to draw a map, Texas Republicans drew a map that gave white voters the power to elect their candidates of choice in the new congressional districts that the state gained as a result of that demographic change. So it was already gerrymandered. They were already manipulating the demographics of the state. And then they come in, and it's one thing to say you're going to redraw 1 seat or 2 seats, but to try to flip 5 seats, that was extremely ambitious. And a lot of people were skeptical that it could be done. But in an era of such surgical map making, it's easier to do these kind of things. It's still not foolproof. They still don't know necessarily that they're going to pick up these 5 seats. But it was completely brazen, the way they did it. And I think that motivated California Democrats to come up with some sort of response, even though they were hamstrung relative to Texas.
The process of drawing new maps in California was more complicated because the state has a history of standing against gerrymandering. As Ari's mentioned, California's got an independent redistricting commission, created back in 2008. It draws congressional maps in a way that's supposed to be politically neutral. To counter that, voters themselves had to instruct the commission to use new, more partisan maps, at least until 2030. Back in the summer, many observers were skeptical that this move could gain traction. But now, even some members of the independent commission seem to be on board.
The reformers I talked to, and there's not unanimity on this point, but certainly the reformers I talked to that support Prop 50 were basically saying that they were willing to sacrifice short-term pain for longer-term ideals, meaning that they didn't want to see the work of the independent commission put aside. But if California did nothing, that would just make the race for the U.S. House even more unfair. That if the idea here is fairness as a principle, then how does it create more fairness if Texas passes a map that gives Trump 5 new seats, but California does nothing?
Basically, you can't unilaterally disarm.
Exactly, that they can't unilaterally disarm, and that, yes, they're doing something that they find personally distasteful, putting aside the work of the independent commission and passing a more partisan map that goes against the ideals of the independent redistricting commission. But it's in service of a greater good, which is making the race for the U.S. House more fair.
Yeah. I mean, you spoke to Sarah Sidwani, a Democratic member of California's Independent Redistricting Commission. When she first heard the plan here, she was like, I don't think this is possible. But then she seems to have become a full convert.
She did, because she didn't think it was possible, like a lot of people didn't think it was possible, because she didn't see how Newsom could sidestep the independent commission. And as a member of that independent redistricting commission, she did not want her work put aside. But she also realized this was the only way that California could respond to what Texas was doing and to what other Republican states would do following Texas, that California had no choice but to respond. And so she became an early convert, and she was basically preaching the message that it's because she cared about democracy, it's because she cared about good governance, that she supported this, because this was going to restore equality and fairness to the race for the U.S. House. And I think that has largely been a successful message in California, because also this is temporary. Their independent redistricting commission is going to redraw the lines after 2030. So basically you're saying is, let's suspend the independent map for 3 election cycles, and then we're going to go back to an independent map. Now, that may be easier said than done. We'll see what happens here. But I think that the idea that California was going to temporarily do something in an extraordinary way to respond to extraordinary circumstances, that hasn't been that hard of a sell in the state.
Yeah, what Texas has done is not temporary.
What Texas has done is not temporary, and what Texas has done is not democratic. They rigged the map for partisan gains without any kind of input from the voters. Now, you could argue California Democrats are also rigging the maps for partisan gains. The difference is that the voters have to weigh in on it. So if the voters don't like it, if the voters view it as anti-democratic, they can defeat it. That is something that has not happened in any Republican-controlled state. Texas, Missouri, North Carolina, none of them put these maps for a vote to their own voters. So the way that redistricting is happening in California, while yes, explicitly partisan, is being done in a much more democratic way than the way it played out in Texas.
So you've alluded to the fact that what's happening with redistricting right now around the country, it doesn't stop with California and Texas. I'm wondering if we can just lay out what's happening other places and how that could impact the 2026 midterms. Like, tell me what's happening in North Carolina.
Yeah, so Texas was the big battlefield. That was, let's pick up 5 seats. Ever since then, it's been more of a seat by seat by seat, state by state by state slog. So what North Carolina did, also a heavily gerrymandered state, I might add, but what they did is they redrew their maps explicitly to try to oust a Black Democrat, Don Davis, who represents the eastern part of the state, which is known as the Black Belt, the historically Black area of North Carolina. This was similar to what Missouri did when they passed a map to try to eliminate the seat also of a Black Democrat, Emanuel Cleaver. So, I mean, there's a strategy here, which is that Republican states are going after Democratic members of Congress. When they can't get rid of 5 of them, like Texas, they're going after 1 of them.
That is so much work for a single seat. How is that worth it for these legislatures to kind of twist themselves around like this?
Well, it just goes to show you how close they believe the race for the House is going to be. They believe that every last district is going to matter here. And that when you add up the numbers, it might not seem like a lot, but when you add up the numbers, if half a dozen or more states do this, you could end up with, for example, 10 or more new Republican seats before voting has begun for the midterms. I mean, that's a big hurdle for Democrats to overcome. I mean, if it's not a wave election like 2018, when the party picks up 40 seats. If it's a closer, more contested election, which is very possible, then every seat could very well matter. But yes, you're right. It's pretty extraordinary that in places like North Carolina and places like Missouri, they're going through all of this effort and really incurring the wrath of the voters in those states simply to redraw one district to benefit Trump and his allies.
You're saying they're incurring the wrath of the voters. How are we seeing that?
Well, just through polling and in some cases, other data points. The voters don't like this. I mean, when you put the plans to voters outside of California, I mean, in Texas and Missouri, in North Carolina, voters disapproved of this process because the voters didn't have a say. And in some states, like in Missouri, where they also added a Republican district, Democrats are trying to gather signatures, for example, to put that map up for a referendum to temporarily block it. And I think the feeling is that when they've engaged in these kind of efforts, there's been a lot of public opposition to the idea of what Republicans are doing.
We'll be back after a quick break. This episode is brought to you by Saks Fifth Avenue. Saks makes it easy to find the perfect gifts and holiday looks that suit your personal style. The holidays can be a whole lot of things. Fun, relaxing, but also a little stressful because you've got a long list of friends and family and you gotta find a gift for everyone. If you go over to Saks.com, I guarantee it's gonna jumpstart all of your ideas for what you should be getting your friends and family. It is the only website on the internet where you're going to find super high-end luxury Prada sneakers next to a crystal floral A-line gown from MacDougall. And then that's right next to a Cynthia Rowley ombre long-sleeved wetsuit. These are things I did not know existed until I went to Saks.com. And now I'm like, maybe I should be getting a bathing suit for my mom this Christmas. Maybe. Going into this holiday season, I feel confident Saks is there to help me find inspiration, curate a holiday wish list, pick out gifts for my loved ones, and have a look ready whatever might come my way. Whether it's an office holiday party, a cozy night in, or a vacation getaway, Saks has got everything you could want. If you're looking for shopping to be personalized and easy this holiday season, then head to Saks Fifth Avenue for inspiring ways to shop for everyone on your list.
Some days, winding down can feel impossible, and after a long week, the idea of a hangover is not so attractive. So, if you're looking for a healthier way to enjoy happy hour, check out Cornbread Hemp's THC Gummies. Cornbread Hemp produces America's first and only USDA organic THC gummy. They're perfect for unwinding, kicking back, and enjoying a chill night with friends without alcohol or the hangover. All Cornbread Hemp products are third-party lab tested for safety and purity, and they're made with real THC and organic ingredients. You can choose from 2 delicious flavors, Blueberry Breeze and Blood Orange Bliss, and they ship directly to your door. Cornbread Hemp THC gummies are designed to help you unwind and relax. So, if you're in need of more chill than thrill, head over to cornbreadhemp.com to order today. Right now, What Next listeners can save 30% on their first order. Just head to cornbreadhemp.com/whatnext and use code WHATNEXT at checkout. That's cornbreadhemp.com/whatnext, code WHATNEXT. Cornbread Hemp. This is the good life.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
So, in terms of GOP-led states, we have Texas, Missouri, North Carolina that have already acted. And we have California, that's a blue state, that's, having this election tomorrow. What are other blue states doing?
So Virginia is the only one that's moving concretely right now. They have a very complicated setup, much like California, because they have an independent commission as well. And so Virginia Democrats have to pass a map before the November 2025 election. They have to go into session after the November 2025 election. Then they need to have the voters approve whatever map they do to give Democrats more seats. So that's even more complicated than what happened in California.
It also sounds complicated because they're having a gubernatorial election right now. So
yes, and it also relies, the governor doesn't play a role in redistricting in Virginia. So they can do this without, but the governor would presumably have to call another special session. Democrats would also have to retain control of the House of Delegates in Virginia, which is also up on the ballot on Tuesday. And so it's a risky plan. But again, I think it's an example of Democrats using their power to try to push the limits of whether this can be done. Illinois is another state where they're trying to pick up another district. That's already a state that's pretty gerrymandered in favor of Democrats, but they're trying to get one new district. There is a back and forth between the members of the Illinois congressional delegation that want to do this and then the members of the Illinois legislature that are less keen on doing it. In Maryland, the head of the Democratic State Senate said he won't redistrict, so he's been ruling that out. Other Democratic states like New York and Colorado, they have independent commissions that can't be circumvented like California before 2028. So I think what's broadly true, if you look at the 10,000 feet lens of the redistricting arms race, is that Democrats have fewer places where they can redistrict, period. And then they also have been less willing to use the power, even in the places where they could do so, relative to the GOP. So the GOP has had more opportunities to do mid-decade gerrymandering, and they've also been more ruthless about doing it.
Huh. Are Democrats SOL here?
Well, I mean, I think the reason why Prop 50 in California is a big deal, and not just in California, is I think a lot of Democratic voters, not just in California, but across the country, hope that if it passes, that's going to send a message that other Democratic states should do this, because it will be something that the voters approve of. So they can say, yes, we are engaging in this redistricting arms race. We didn't want to do it. We had no choice, but the voters themselves said it was okay for us to do it. And therefore, we have some legitimacy to this process that other Republican states don't have.
Is there a chance that folks start to run out of time here? Like, you're talking about the Democrats equivocating a little bit, waiting on California. But in the meantime, I don't get the sense that GOP politicians are pausing here. Like, Louisiana is scheduling a special session, right, to sort of lay the groundwork for gerrymandering. Other states are considering the same, right?
Yeah, I mean, and there's also a whole other wild card in this whole conversation, which is the Supreme Court is considering weakening or potentially killing the last remaining part of the Voting Rights Act, which protects majority-minority districts. And so if the Supreme Court were to strike that provision down, that could give particularly southern states where there are a lot of these majority-minority districts that elect primarily Democrats of color, they could start redrawing their maps too. So this is really a ticking time bomb, because I think the idea that there's already this partisan gerrymandering arms race going on, and then at the same time, you could have the fact that the Supreme Court says that racial gerrymandering is basically okay too. That could lead to a total free-for-all in terms of how maps are drawn. And I think that would skew fair representation even further from where it is right now.
Yeah. You've alluded to some trepidation from GOP lawmakers as they're considering redrawing maps around the country. I wonder if it's worth diving into what that trepidation can look like. Like, I was struck by the fact that there seemed to be a bunch of back and forth in Indiana about whether they would redistrict. As of this point, it seems like the governor is going to call a special session. But is it worth looking at one state, maybe two, about like what the GOP legislators were saying and what it tells you about how that party is feeling about what they're doing here?
Yeah, I mean, you've heard this in a number of different states, and it seems to be intensifying in a number of Midwestern states. In Indiana and Kansas and Nebraska, these are places where maybe there's a Midwestern sense of decency that doesn't exist in a place like Texas, not to throw shade at Texas, but they basically are saying, like, why do we need to do this? Like, we redrew our maps. We drew them in the way that we saw fit. And why should we get involved just because the president of the United States wants us to do so?
I mean, I was going to say, we all know why you are being told to do this. Donald Trump is asking for it.
But that puts them in a very precarious position with the leaders of their party. Because, I mean, just look at Indiana, for example. I mean, that has been the really ground zero for the Stop the Steal effort of 2025, which is that J.D. Vance has already gone to Indiana twice to try to pressure Republicans to support the redistricting effort. Indiana Republicans were already dispatched to the White House for a meeting with Trump. And so the White House is really pulling out all the stops. And the fact that they are running into resistance from some Republicans is interesting, because I think that Republican politicians know that this is unpopular with the voters. Now, in some cases, they don't care because they're insulating themselves from the voters through this kind of redistricting effort. But some people just don't want to go through the process. They don't want to go through the hassle of incurring anger from their constituents and mobilizing Democrats and potentially even alienating some Republican voters simply to pick up 1 seat or 2 seats for their party. Now, there hasn't been a lot of tangible resistance at the end of the day. Republicans have folded in every state pretty much that Trump has pressured them. But it's worth noting that these doubts remain. And in some places, there are examples of Republicans not caving. For example, in New Hampshire, Republican Governor Kelly Ayotte said, I'm not doing it. I'm just not going to do it. And Trump's like, I'll primary you. And she's like, fine, primary me.
But that's what it takes. It takes someone saying, like, yes, I will lay down my office, essentially.
The thing you also have to remember here, Mary, is that, yes, Trump remains incredibly popular within the Republican Party, but he's more unpopular than ever nationally. And so Republicans in swing areas have to keep that in mind. And they have largely gone along with the president's agenda, but that's because most of the Republicans that have gone along with the president's agenda don't have to represent competitive districts. Those that do have to represent competitive districts, and that might not only mean members of Congress, it could also mean state legislative officials that are in competitive districts. They're more apprehensive about going along with Trump's agenda because it's not a win for them.
I feel like I'm talking to you in the middle of a storm, but where do you feel like this ends? Like, how optimistic or pessimistic are you for what this all means for 2026?
Well, I think it's going to mean that a 2026 election with many fewer competitive districts than there otherwise would have been. It's going to shrink the playing field for the House in both red and blue states. And what I worry even beyond what happens in November 2026 is that something that was very abnormal has become normalized.
What do you mean?
Well, basically parties are going to say, like, if we don't like the current political climate and we want to insulate ourselves from it, we're just going to redraw our districts whenever we want. So what's to stop, if you did a mid-decade gerrymander in 2026, what's to stop you from doing one in 2028 or in 2030? Or the census comes out and you draw new maps for 2032. You don't like how the maps turn out, so you just redraw them in 2034.
Basically, you think we are rebranding gerrymandering.
I think gerrymandering just becomes a perpetual thing now, that absent court intervention or federal legislation just becomes the new normal. And I think that would be something that would be bad for democracy and also incredibly unpopular with voters across the political spectrum. And I worry about the fact that we're losing Republicans in blue states and we're losing Democrats in red states. And how can anyone compromise if it's just rabid partisans on both sides? And so I think that just this whole conversation, we're talking about something that is ultimately bad for democracy and is getting worse.
Ari, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Mary. Great to talk to you again.
Ari Berman is a voting rights reporter at Mother Jones. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, and Madeline Ducharme. Paige Osburn is the senior supervising producer of What Next and What Next TBD. Mia Lobel is the head of audio here at Slate. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations. And I'm Mary Harris. Go track me down on Blue Sky. Say hey. I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you back here next time.